Picture this. You're a young girl, torn from your village in the misty hills of the Caucasus, your family slaughtered or scattered like autumn leaves in a storm. The world you knew vanishes in the hold of a creaking ship, bound for Constantinople, where marble palaces hide horrors that would make the devil himself avert his eyes. The air grows thick with the scent of incense and despair as you're marched through shadowed corridors, your identity stripped away like old skin. This is no fairy tale of luxury and intrigue. This is the Ottoman harem, a gilded cage where thousands of women lived lives of enforced silence, their bodies and souls bent to the will of an empire that devoured innocence like a ravenous beast. Think you understand the opulence of sultans and their courts? Think the harem was a place of pampered indulgence, whispered secret, and romantic liaison? Well, buckle up, because you're about to uncover a reality so systematically cruel, so deeply woven into the fabric of power, that it challenges everything you thought you knew about one of history's greatest empires. From girls as young as 7 forced into lifelong servitude, to the intricate web of psychological torment that turned sisters against sisters and mothers against daughters, all hidden behind walls of silk and stone. These are the facts that will completely destroy your illusions about the Ottoman world. Spoiler alert. This isn't just about a few tyrannical rulers. This is about an entire institution designed to consume female autonomy and transform it into a tool for imperial control. Before we descend into the shadowed halls of Topkapi Palace, I would love to know where you're watching from. Drop a comment below and let me know your country or city. It's an incredible thing that we can connect from all corners of the globe to explore these timeless stories of power and ruin. And if you enjoy these deep dives into the shadows of history, consider hitting that subscribe button, because the darkness has many more secrets to reveal. To understand the dark secrets of the Ottoman harems, you must first grasp the world that birthed them. The Ottoman Empire spanned 3 continents for over 6 centuries, from the 14th to the early 20th century, conquering lands from the Balkans to North Africa. At its heart stood the Sultan, a figure of absolute power, whose rule was maintained not just through armies and alliances, but through the meticulous control of his household. The harem, or haram, meaning forbidden or sacred, was the private quarters reserved for women, secluded from the male world. But this seclusion was no sanctuary. It was a prison of protocol, where the Sultan's mother, wives, concubines, daughters, and servants, mostly slaves, lived in isolation. Introduced under Islamic influences from the Arab caliphates, the harem evolved into a political powerhouse, especially during the 16th and 17th century, in what historians call the Sultanate of Women. Yet beneath the veil of influence lay profound suffering. The imperial harem at Topkapi Palace, later moved to Dolmabahce, housed up to 1,000 women at it. These weren't free souls. Most were captives from raids in Eastern Europe, the Caucasus or Africa, bought, sold, and gifted like exotic treasures. Ottoman records show that slave markets in Istanbul operated openly until the early 20th century, with women classified by age, beauty, and origin, their prices soaring for those deemed valuable for the Sultan's bed. The structure was rigidly hierarchical, a pyramid of power that crushed those at the bottom. At the apex sat the Valide Sultan, the Sultan's mother, wielding authority over the entire harem. She was the custodian of dynastic legacy, often a former slave herself who had risen through cunning and childbirth. Below her were the Sultan's official wives, up to 4 under Islamic law. But the real players were the concubines, or Iqbal and Hayski, selected for their allure and fertility. These women weren't lovers in the romantic sense. They were instruments of reproduction, their worth measured in sons who could inherit the throne. Daughters and lesser concubines filled the middle ranks, while at the base toiled hundreds of servants, young girls trained in domestic arts, their dreams of freedom extinguished like candles in the night. Guarding this female domain were the eunuchs, castrated men like the Kisler Agha, the chief black eunuch, who enforced rules with whips and whispers. This hierarchy wasn't born of chance. It was a deliberate design, rooted in the empire's need for control. As sultans grew sedentary in their palaces, the harem became a microcosm of imperial politics. Women, secluded from the outside world, formed factions, allying with viziers or foreign ambassadors to influence wars and succession. But this power came at a terrible cost: constant surveillance, enforced virginity for the unselected, and the ever-present threat of demotion or death. Imagine arriving as a new slave, perhaps a Circassian girl of 12, your family lost to raiders. You're stripped, examined like livestock in the Avrit Pazari, the female slave bazaar, where buyers probed for defects. Prices ranged from 1,500 kurush for African girls to 88,000 for white Europeans, taxed by the state, as if you were mere merchandise. Once purchased, you're renamed, your old identity erased, and thrust into the harem's training regimen. Days blend into endless lessons, belly dancing to entice, poetry to charm, music to soothe. But these arts masked a darker purpose, conditioning you for sexual service. Older women, survivors of the same fate, oversee your transformation, their eyes hollow with unspoken regrets. You learn to read the Sultan's moods, to submit without question, knowing that one night of favor could elevate you to Hayski, mother of a prince, or condemn you to obscurity. The harem's architecture reinforced this nightmare. At Topkapi, over 400 rooms formed a labyrinth of courtyards and chambers, deliberately fragmented to prevent alliances. The Valide Sultan's quarters overlooked all, a throne room of intrigue where she orchestrated marriages and execution. Windows were barred, doors locked, and the only escape was through death or rare manumission after years of service. Psychological torment was woven into every silk thread. Isolation bred paranoia. Women spied on each other, reporting whispers to gain favor. Friendships were rare, poisoned by competition for the Sultan's gaze. Unselected concubines aged into servants, their youth wasted in celibate drudgery, while favorites bore children only to fear poisoning or strangulation if their sons threatened rivals. Contemporary accounts from European diplomats paint a vivid picture. Lady Mary Wortley Montagu, visiting in the 18th century, described the harem as a perpetual masquerade of false luxury, hiding melancholy and despair. Ottoman chronicles reveal how sultans like Suleiman the Magnificent elevated concubines like Hurrem Sultan to power, yet even she navigated a minefield of assassinations and betrayals. The dark secret. This wasn't mere tradition. It was a machine of control, turning women's bodies into currency for dynastic stability. Slave origins ensured no competing loyalty. Wives from noble families were rare, their influence checked by the Valide's iron fist. Economic incentives fueled the system. Harems generated revenue through slave taxes and alliances sealed by gifted concubines. But the human cost was immeasurable. Girls entered as innocents, emerging, if they survived, as shadows, their spirits broken by years of objectification. Some chose suicide, throwing themselves from palace walls into the Bosphorus below. Others endured, birthing heirs in blood-soaked chambers, only to watch their sons murdered in succession struggles. This was the Ottoman harem's foundation, a fortress of forbidden desires, where power's price was paid in female suffering. As we delve deeper, prepare to uncover the daily nightmares that made this institution a living hell. The walls may have been adorned with gold, but they echoed with silent screams. Now that we've peeled back the first layer of this gilded abyss, let's step inside the daily rhythm of the Ottoman harem, a symphony of servitude where every hour was calibrated to crush the soul. Imagine waking before dawn in a cramped dormitory, the air heavy with the breath of 100 other women, your body aching from yesterday's labors. This wasn't a life of leisure. It was a meticulously orchestrated torment designed to maintain order through isolation and indoctrination. The harem's routine began with Fajr prayers, enforced by eunuchs who patrolled like silent specters. Women rose to wash in communal baths, their bodies scrutinized for any sign of rebellion or illness. Breakfast was sparse, bread, olives, perhaps yogurt for the favored, eaten in silence under the watchful eyes of senior concubines. No idle chatter, words were weapons in this world, easily twisted into accusations of disloyalty. Mornings were devoted to training and toil. Young girls, newly arrived slaves, faced the harshest regimen. They were schooled in the erotic arts, not as empowerment, but as survival tools. Belly dancing lessons lasted hours, bodies pushed to exhaustion, hips swaying to rhythms that mimicked submission. Poetry recitation followed, verses chosen to flatter the sultan's ego, while musical instruction on the oud or canon served to mask the underlying purpose, crafting perfect companions for fleeting nights of imperial pleasure. But the dark secret here was the psychological breaking. Trainers, often older women who had endured the same, used manipulation to instill obedience. Resist, and you'll be sold to a brothel, they'd whisper, their voices laced with remembered fear. Girls learned to suppress tears, to smile through pain, knowing that virginity was their only currency, certified by public examinations in the slave market, a humiliation that scarred the mind before the body. Afternoons brought domestic drudgery for the lower ranks. Servants scrubbed floors, prepared meals in vast kitchens, or tended gardens within the harem's walls, never stepping outside, never glimpsing the sunlit world beyond. The Valide Sultan's court was the nerve center, where she held audience like a queen, dispensing favors or punishment. A favored concubine might join her, sipping sherbet while plotting alliances, but most toiled in obscurity, their days blending into monotonous despair. Competition poisoned every interaction. The harem's hierarchy fostered rivalry. Iqbals vied for the sultan's bed, knowing a single night could birth a prince and elevate their status. But failure meant demotion, back to servant quarters, or worse, resale. Ottoman records detail how women poisoned rivals' food or spread rumors of infidelity, turning the harem into a viper's nest. The Valide Sultan orchestrated this chaos, ensuring no one threatened her son's rule. Eunuchs enforced the nightmare. The Kisla Agha, often of African origin, commanded hundreds of castrated guards, their loyalty bought with power and wealth. They controlled access, delivered messages, and meted out whippings for infractions like speaking out of turn. One account from the 16th century describes a concubine lashed for glancing at a male visitor through a lattice screen. Her crime, a momentary lapse in seclusion. Evenings were the harem's cruelest theatre. As dusk fell, selected women prepared for the sultan's summons. Baths were ritualistic, bodies oiled, hair perfumed, makeup applied to mask exhaustion. The chosen one entered the sultan's chambers, her fate hanging on his whim. Success meant gifts and elevation. Rejection could mean years of neglect. For the unselected, nights were endless vigils, listening to distant laughter or cries, their isolation deepening into madness. The psychological toll was devastating. Women developed what we now call learned helplessness, conditioned to view themselves as property, their value tied to fertility and beauty. Many suffered from chronic anxiety, depression, or dissociation, retreating into fantasies of escape. Ottoman fatwas even permitted owners to kill disobedient slaves without spiritual consequence, a legal horror that hung over every head. Children born in this world faced their own tragedy. Sons were potential heirs, raised in luxury, but often murdered in fratricidal purges. Sultans like maimed III executed 19 brothers to cure the daughters became political pawns, married off to seal alliances, their weddings feared as gateways to new harems of suffering. Mothers clung to their offspring, knowing separation was inevitable, their bonds severed by imperial decree. This daily grind wasn't accidental, it was engineered for control. The harem's seclusion, women forbidden from leaving, even for funerals, ensured loyalty. Economic realities amplified the horror. Slaves generated wealth through labor and reproduction, their offspring staffing the empire's bureaucracy. European observers like Ogier Geislin de Busbeck noted the melancholy air pervading the palace, where women aged prematurely from stress and confinement. Yet amid the darkness, some women wielded subtle power. Hurrem Sultan, a Ukrainian slave who became Suleiman's wife, influenced policy through letters and alliances, proving the harem's political reach. But such stories mask the majority's fate, anonymous suffering in a system that commodified femininity. As night fell on Topkapi, the harem's lamps flickered like dying hopes, illuminating a world where luxury was but a thin veneer over systemic brutality. As the veil lifts further, we confront the harem's deepest shadows, the raw exploitation that turned women into vessels of imperial desire. Picture a concubine, her body marked by the sultan's touch, bearing a child in agony, only to have it torn away if it threatened the dynasty. This wasn't passion. It was calculated violation, woven into the empire's very fabric. Sexual exploitation formed the harem's core horror. Under Ottoman law, sultans could bed any slave without consequence, rape sanctified as divine right. Religious scholars issued fatwas framing it as a reward for the faithful, twisting faith into a tool of subjugation. Concubines were selected through harvet, private audiences, where the sultan inspected them like prizes. Refusal meant death or sale to brothels, where survival was measured in broken spirits. The Valide Sultan often chose these women, her influence a double-edged sword. She elevated favorites to secure her lineage, but crushed threats with poison or exile. Historical records from the 17th century detail group encounters, where women assisted in each other's degradation, their humiliation a spectacle for the Sultan's amusement. Health consequences were dire. Untreated diseases, botched abortions, and chronic pain from forced relation. Betrayal lurked in every corner. Factions formed around potential heirs, with concubines allying against rivals. The infamous cage system, in later centuries, confined princes to harem apartments, their mothers scheming from the shadows. One dark tale from Murad III's reign, 1574–1595, describes him expanding the harem to over 40 wives, tripling its size for his appetites. leaving women in perpetual competition and despair. Eunuchs, meant as protectors, often became abusers. Their castration bred resentment, leading to physical and sexual violence against the women they guarded. The Kisler Aghar amassed fortunes through bribes, selling access or favors, turning the harem into a marketplace of corruption. Women who resisted faced bostansai, executioners, strangulation with silk cords, their bodies dumped in the Bosphorus. Aging brought new terrors. As beauty faded, concubines were demoted to servants or sold, their years of service forgotten. Some were manumitted after menopause, cast into poverty without skills or family. The psychological scars ran deep. Survivors spoke of dissociation, viewing their bodies as detached objects, a coping mechanism for endless violation. Politically, the harem was a double-edged blade. During the Sultanate of Women, figures like Kursum Sultan ruled as regent, influencing conquests and treaties. Yet this power stemmed from survival in a system that demanded betrayal. Alliances with foreign powers, through letters smuggled by eunuchs, could topple sultan, but failure meant execution. The harem bridged palace and world, but at the cost of women's humanity. Economic exploitation fueled the machine. Slave raids in the Crimea and Africa supplied fresh inventory, with merchants offering warranties on virginity and fertility. The state taxed these transactions, profiting from human misery. Caravans and ships transporting women in chains, their journeys marked by assault and starvation, breaking spirits before arrival. Children of this system inherited trauma. Boys were groomed for military roles, girls for political marriages, their upbringing steeped in intrigue. Fratricide, legal until the 17th century, saw brothers slaughtered to prevent civil war, mothers weeping as executioners claimed their sons. This cycle perpetuated the horror, with survivors often replicating abuse in their own households. International observers documented the darkness. Venetian ambassadors reported a perpetual prison where women languished in melancholy. Archaeological evidence from Topkapi reveals fragmented rooms, symbolizing divided lives. The move to Dolmabahce in 1856 modernized the facade, but preserved the seclusion, with lavish quarters hiding the same systemic cruelty. The ultimate betrayal. The empire's religious justification. Fatwas declared enslaving infidel women a duty, their bodies rewards for conquest. This corrupted spirituality, turning mosques into silent accomplices. Women converted forcibly, their old faiths erased, yet resistance simmered in whispered prayers. As we approach the harem's legacy, remember, these weren't isolated acts but institutional policies spanning centuries. The shadows of exploitation lingered long after the empire's fall, a testament to power's corrupting force. The harem's walls may have crumbled, but their echoes of betrayal haunt history's corridors. In the fading light of our journey, we confront the harem's enduring legacy, a scar on history that time cannot heal. Imagine the empire's collapse in 1922, women emerging from seclusion like ghosts, their lives shattered, yet the world indifferent to their stories. This wasn't just a chapter of Ottoman rule. It was a cautionary tale of how power devours the vulnerable, its echoes resonating in modern shadows. The psychological aftermath created generations of trauma. Survivors struggled with identity, their years of objectification leaving them disconnected from self and society. Many faced stigma, viewed as tainted by their past, unable to marry or integrate. Substance abuse, depression, and suicide plagued former concubines, their conditioning so deep that freedom felt like another prison. Politically, the harem's influence shaped the empire's fate. The Sultanate of Women saw valide sultans like Turhan Hattis orchestrate coups, but this power was fleeting, often ending in assassination. The system's instability contributed to Ottoman decline, as internal intrigues weakened external might. Yet its model influenced harems across the Islamic world, perpetuating cycles of seclusion and control. Economically, the legacy persisted in trafficking networks that evolved into modern exploitation. The slave market's bureaucracy, detailed catalogues, taxes, and hierarchies mirrored corporate efficiency, a dark precursor to today's human trade. Archaeological finds from Dolmabahce reveal opulent artifacts alongside evidence of confinement, like barred windows and hidden passages, symbols of enduring oppression. Children of the harem carried the burden forward. Princes raised in isolation often became paranoid rulers, their reigns marked by violence. Princesses, married into foreign courts, exported the model, spreading its influence. This intergenerational trauma warped family dynamics, with survivors replicating hierarchies in private homes, ensuring the nightmare's survival. Religiously, The harem corrupted Islamic ideals, twisting teachings on protection into tools of subjugation. Fatwas justifying exploitation created moral paradoxes, where faith became a shield for atrocity. Reformers in the 19th century, influenced by European ideas, began dismantling the system, but abolition came slowly, with the last harems dissolving in the 1920s. The dark secrets revealed. The harem was no haven, but a machine of dehumanization, where women's bodies fueled imperial ambition. From raided villages to palace intrigues, it systematized suffering, reducing lives to footnotes in history's grand narrative. Yet in their resilience, whispered rebellions, smuggled messages, women forged quiet resistances, seeds of change that outlasted the empire. This is the reality of the Ottoman harems, not romantic legend, but a living nightmare that consumed souls while the world watched. These women weren't ornaments, they were human beings who deserved autonomy, dignity, and freedom. Instead, they got a system designed to break them, rebuilding them as shadows of power's insatiable hunger. The tragedy isn't just what happened within those walls, it's what it reveals about humanity's capacity for normalized cruelty. In an age of progress, the harem reminds us that civilization's facade can conceal profound failures. These stories demand remembrance, lest we repeat the patterns of exploitation in new forms. As the echoes fade, reflect, how far have we truly come? The harem's legacy whispers across centuries, a terrifying reminder that power, unchecked, devours the innocent. Be careful in pursuing empires of the mind, for the devil lurks in the details of forgotten suffering.